To the open meeting of the regular board meeting of education, July 25th, 2022. Can I please have a roll call?
Audrey Adamson. Here. Justin Anderson. Chet DeSmet. Kate Schaefer. Here. Maria Estragueros. Here. Andrew Wayert. Andrew Wayert.
I see him.
Chad. Chad.
Andrew Wayert.
Yes, we have 4.
Okay.
Eric Alden Smith.
I'm here. All right, everybody rise for the pledge of allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the minutes. The minutes of the open session of the regular board meeting of education on June 7th, 2022. Can I have a motion, please? Second. Any discussion? No? Hearing none, could I have a roll call, please? Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No communication?
No.
None? Okay. All right, now the public hearing of the proposed 2020-2023 school district budget. All right.
Yes.
All right, we will now begin the hearing of the proposed 2022-2023 school district budget. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in favor of the proposed 2022-2023 school district budget? Okay. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the proposed 2022-2023 school district budget? Is there anyone who wishes to speak neither for nor against the proposed 2022-2023 school district budget, but wishes to offer additional information? If no public comments, we will now close the hearing of the proposed 2022 school district budget. Okay. You don't need to vote or anything, correct?
No.
Okay. Okay, so before we go on to the consent agenda, we are going to pull A2. Chairman Van Born is listed under the temporary employment as certified hourly instructor. Mr. Van Born notified Human Resources that he has accepted a position in another district. We are pulling B due to the conflict of interest for a board member who has needs to vote separately.
Hey guys, I'm here in case.
Hey. And we're also pulling number 7. Okay, so the recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the actions and agenda as presented, except for B. But I have a motion, please.
Yeah.
You also need the call.
I'm already going, you have 3 recommended motions. This one.
We noted that.
Yeah. So they were A1, A3, and C.
Okay.
They'll be best to sign.
Okay. So, sorry about that, guys.
It's confusing.
It is confusing. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the resolution authorizing the adoption of the annual budget for the 2022-2023 fiscal year. I have a motion. Second. No discussion, hearing none, could we have the roll call, please?
Kate Schaefer. Aye. Maria Estrelleros.
Aye.
Andrew Ware.
Aye.
Audrey Adamson.
Aye.
Aaron Waldron Smith.
Aye. Recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the actions contained in consent agenda A1, A3, and C through W as presented. Do I have a motion, please? Second. Any discussion? All right, could I have a roll call, please?
Maria Estrelleros.
Aye.
Andrew Ware.
Aye.
Audrey Adamson.
Aye.
Kate Schaefer. Aye. Aaron Waldron Smith.
Aye. Recommended motion is the Board of Education approve the actions contained in consent agenda item A2 as amended. I have a motion, please.
So moved. Second.
Discussion, hearing none. Roll call, please.
Andrew Ware. Audrey Adamson.
Aye.
Kate Schaefer. Aye. Maria Estrelleros.
Aye.
Andrew Ware. Aaron Waldron Smith.
Aye. Recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the actions contained in a consent agenda item B as presented.
So moved.
Second. Discussion, hearing none. Roll call.
Audrey Adamson.
Aye.
Kate Schaefer. Aye. Maria Estrelleros. Aye. Aaron Waldron Smith.
Aye. Okay. Moving on.
Also?
That was, we voted on that one because it was amended.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We had amended instead of annual budget, so we might just have to fix that.
Gotcha.
Okay. So number 8 is the rescind sale of property. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education rescind the sale of Stanley Ingstrom Park, number 1726 400-021. SUPR Assistant Map Lot 44 Sheet 16 to the Village of Coal Valley as quit claim deed for $1 as a previously approved April 11th, 2022 board meeting. Dave, do you want to talk about this at all?
No, I just want to put in the memo that it, actually, when they did a title search, they actually already owned it. So I wanted it to be a public document that we rescind the sale. So in the future, nobody would get confused.
Do you have any questions about that? Okay, could I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Kate Schaefer. Aye. Maria Estrelleros.
Aye.
Andrew Ware. Audrey Adamson.
Aye.
Aaron Waldron Smith.
Aye.
Aye.
Great presentation.
Okay. All right, next, we're going to hear a presentation on this student code of conduct.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We are in the process of gearing up for the next school year. And in addition to a number of other processes and procedures that we are working on, revising our district code of conduct for all levels is one of those pieces. So tonight, we're just going to give you some background information on our district codes of conduct. We have an elementary, a middle, and a high school separate document. We did have the intent to bring those documents forward to you tonight for approval, but we received them later than expected from legal review. So we will bring them back to you for approval at our next meeting. And that certainly gives board members enough time to read through the document, ask any questions, provide any feedback. But we did think it was a good idea to provide you the information tonight so that you could have some background foundation. So this work is in connection to a pay school, which I have proposed for you tonight coming up under E for environment. Remember, PACE is our strategic goal acronym people, achievement, community, and environment. So this particular goal that we are proposing for tonight is under E for environment. Implement a revised district code of conduct with consistency and fidelity across all schools to ensure safe and structured learning environments for all students. So that's the connection to our strategic plan. The rationale for reviewing and updating our codes of conduct are here. We are coming out of 2.5 years of a pandemic, and many would say the pandemic isn't over, but we are certainly coming past a unique phase in the pandemic, and we are seeing the results of that. We had significant stretches of student removal from the learning environment for nearly 2 school years, and certainly along with that was the associated expectations for behavior. Students were very far removed from the learning environment and all of the associated expectations that went along with that. So after this last school year where we had no school shutdowns, we still had a number of students in and out of quarantine, but we have now what we call a new baseline. So we've got a pretty strategic eye on our discipline data. Kristen Sanders, Assistant Superintendent, has really been digging into this data with the district discipline committee for the last several months. So this is a culmination of all of that work. And we're grateful to the administrators and teachers from across the district that work together to get us to this point. And obviously from a district standpoint, we want more consistency from building to building, and we want to create more systemness so parents can expect similar procedures, similar expectations, and similar outcomes, regardless of which school that their student attends, keeping in mind that we know that what's appropriate varies at the different levels, elementary, middle, and high school. So what has changed? These revised codes of conduct are pulled together from many different district sources. We pulled all of the student handbooks from our various buildings. We brought in school board policy, other procedures and handbooks that were on our website. So this is really a culmination of mostly current information. So most of what you have in front of you is not new. It's just pulling it together in one central source for our families. Approximately 90% of these revised codes of conduct is not new. Again, just pulled together from various different sources. So it's easier for parents to find, easier for all stakeholders to really be able to navigate. So what is new, what is different? Really, there are 3 sections that have substantive changes that the discipline committee under Kristen's leadership really spent a lot of time digging into. And that's what you'll see here tonight. Some different changes under the student rights and responsibilities section, student appearance section, and behavior offense categories. So these adjustments are really a culmination of a year of review of our new baseline data and working together so that we can ensure really just safe and structured schools across the district and safe learning environments for our students. So again, our purpose for tonight has changed a little bit. Tonight, we just want to provide some updates and some data, provide a paper copy of the draft high school code of conduct. We're calling it draft because not yet been board approved. We intend to bring that back to you for approval at our next meeting. We printed the paper code of, we printed the high school code of conduct in paper for you to hold in your hands. It is our most comprehensive book, being our largest school at the high school level. And I believe Kristen is going to send it to you electronically, the elementary versions and the middle school versions. They do not have anything different. It's just that the high school has a lot more. So it made sense to print the largest one so that you can have that in your hands, make notes as you see fit, be able to have a better job of reading that and having your questions prepared. So she will send those to you. You can have a chance to take a look at those as well. And then the intent is to seek approval at our next meeting after you've had an opportunity to review and have any questions answered or provide any additional input.
So I'm going to review a little bit of the data with you. You've looked at this sort of data before in previous board presentations, and some of this data feeds into it comes directly from Skyward, our student information system, and that feeds directly into the State Board of Education SIS. And so when they're looking at districts' exclusionary discipline data, this is where they're getting it, okay? So this is a 6-year trend. I've been looking at this data for 6 years and sharing this data with principals for 6 years as we have kind of gone through pre-pandemic, pandemic, and then now back last year, full steam ahead. And you notice we're kind of where we were 3 years ago in terms of the number of in-school suspensions. Hasn't been a lot of change there. We had a lot of maladaptive behavior last school year. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody that we saw that. And that's reflective of that. And when we look at suspension data, it's kind of a general outcome measure for us. It tells us what kind of behavior that we're seeing in schools. And when the numbers are lower, it tells us that we're not seeing a lot of behavior. But on the other hand, we want that data to go down. We want the data to decrease because that will tell us the kids are doing better, that we're seeing less behavior in schools. So it's not just that we want an artificial lowering of that data. We want it to really be reflective on how kids are handling school. So when I talk with principals about this, I'm not just looking for them, don't suspend anybody. We're trying to get at the root cause of why we're seeing that behavior and what we're doing about it. And Brian's going to talk with you a little bit about that in terms of some of the strategies that we've tried over the past 6 years. Some which we feel like it's working. You don't know what the data would look like if you hadn't done any of those things, of course, but it is what it is. This is out of school suspension data. And again, it's as high as it's ever been. And this data feeds directly into the exclusionary discipline data that we're measured against in terms of all 850 school districts in the state of Illinois. Last year, we ranked 162nd. We were not in the top 20%. Yay us. I don't know how this is going to compare to everybody else next year. In order to get off that state watch list, we need 4 years of not being in the top 20%. And so if you recall in February, we reviewed a little bit of this data. We didn't have our newest 2022 data, but we had last year's and the previous 5 years. And so you approved a discipline improvement plan that we had to submit to the state this year. And so they have not approved our plan yet. I anticipate that they will, but I guess they reviewed every single plan and approved those things. But it looks pretty solid, so I'm hopeful that that will get approved. And then I broke down the data for you a little differently, elementary versus secondary. So our middle schools and high schools are represented in the orange, and our elementary schools in our blue. And so we know that there's a lot more exclusionary discipline in our middle schools and high schools compared to our elementary schools. I think definitely at the elementary level, we take a developmental approach to discipline and student behavior, and they have it's just a different structure. There's a different kind of ownership for kids. You know, when you're in elementary school, you have one teacher all day, and it's quite different than going to 6 teachers all day. And so I think that's probably feeds into a little bit of why the data looks a little different. We have one counselor for each elementary school now. That's changed drastically over the last 2 years. And as a result, they're really able to hang on to kids throughout the day. This is the out of school suspension data. It shows the same trend in terms of more exclusionary discipline at the secondary level in terms of out of schools than compared to elementaries. Do you have any questions about any of this data so far?
Just based on numbers of these individual incidents, but then aren't representative, because I'm sure there's some students that participated in this activity
Absolutely.
multiple times. And so
these are discipline events,
Okay.
okay? So it doesn't mean 600 kids, for example. So you can look at the data in terms of how many kids are generating these discipline events. And so one of the things I do with principals every year is I pull their building data. And they look at their own data. And then we also, out of EduClimber, will pull into the student data so they can see which students are having the most exclusionary discipline so that they can really target that a little bit more. In the spring, I met with all the principals and I had Greg Green set up a monthly report that they got in terms of the number of office referrals, where those referrals were coming from. You know, was it the classroom, was it the hallway, was it the cafeteria, was it before school, was it after school, was it in the middle of the day? So they could try to target, they need more supervision in a certain area of the school. So we could, referrals feed into exclusionary discipline, as you know, particularly at the secondary school. And so we want them to look at that more often than once a year. And so they were looking at, they would get an automatic report sent to them every month that would, they could kind of pick what factors they wanted to look at. They could look at it by grade, they could look at it by race, they could look at it by gender. And so they would hopefully look at that data with their behavior problem solving team and try to stay ahead of it. So that was kind of some of the things that we've done with the data. Kate.
So you've only really been tracking it for 5 years, so we don't have like that what we're doing with the students in the elementary is transferring into the middle schools and high schools. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, we haven't tracked it long enough to know if that's making.
Well, it's hard to say. Kids move schools. We don't always have the exact same cohort. Certain schools have more mobility rates are higher than other schools.
Yeah.
So and this has been in part of our discipline improvement plan. We have worked on a lot of newcomer programs and student ambassador and link crew and some of those things to help integrate new students into new schools in terms of them teaching them the behavior expectations and common areas in the classrooms and throughout the school day. So it's never a complete match. But I think if you look at the overall trend data for 6 years, I would say the majority of the kids, we know that are here in 2022, we're here in 2017. Now, some of these are kindergartners, you know, in elementary, you're always gonna have, but certainly at the secondary level, they were here, most of them were here in elementary, they were just all spread out. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, that helps. Okay. Good pieces together. Erin.
So you answered like 3 of my questions already, but, so I know a lot of the elementary schools use class dojo,
Correct.
and we're talking about consistency across the board. So are we trying at elementary level? Brian.
Yes, that's gonna be Brian in about
You're stealing my
2 minutes.
presentation.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about some of our changes we're gonna make for next year, in addition to this. Brian's gonna talk about some of the things that we have been doing and are gonna do differently at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And then I'll finish up after he's finished, or after he's done, with some of the other things that I wanted to specifically point out to you in the codes.
Sorry about stealing your thunder.
No,
That's
no, that's
okay. No,
good.
it's a great question.
So thanks for having us here tonight. It's been a while since I've been in front of you, but I want to reiterate what Dr. Sanders said, a consistent aligned approach, right? We're a big unit district. We have 10 elementaries, 2 middle schools, the high school. So when we talk about tier 1, we're talking about everything we do every day, right? Like the tier 1 is, we're hoping to get over 80% of those kids roughly involved. So these are just some of the things that we wanted to highlight. The school-wide teaching of behaviors in the common area. I mean, that's just something we do routinely, and we do it every year. And that is something that we know that works. We've seen it work. And when we have areas that spike, we target those areas, and we use that data piece, as Kristen mentioned, quite a bit. We're always looking at the data to identify those areas. So classroom teaching of class expectations, that's a no-brainer. That happens across the board. The school-wide referral, again, going back to the data piece that Kristen mentioned, we're always looking at that data, looking for those hot spots and then targeting those areas. That's just what we do every day. in our buildings. And honestly, at the elementary, it's a lot easier to target that because you have those kids all the time. And in the secondary, having those 7 period days and rotating, it's just a challenge. But one of the things that I know you mentioned was, for example, at the elementary, we're looking at the class dojo usage, and that's something that we're talking about expanding. I've already dropped that to the principals at the elementary. The one thing we like about class dojo is not only is it a communication tool, it's also that piece that helps us track the data. And when we talk about discipline, I think we need to remember the focus is positive, right? We see when we focus on positive, kids want attention. And that's something in the tier 1 that we work on. And one of the concerns I know as a former building principal of Class Dojo was focusing on kids and parents constantly, my kid's not 100%, your kid's not supposed to be 100%. Kids aren't perfect. And the way that system's designed is it kind of focuses on the tier 1 is we expect about 80% of the time positive, right? So when we think about that, we're going to be expanding that for that consistency. And we're going to link that in. We do have Remind, for example, and we're going to clarify that with elementary. So elementary, a lot of the communication will probably flow through Class Dojo between the teacher and the parents, whereas a lot of district communication will go through Remind. But we are going to get that unified. We've got a plan in place. We're going to present that in August to the principals, and it will be integrated at a pace that those buildings that aren't fully invested in Dojo at the elementary, that we can get them in. So we're excited about that. And again, some of this thing that Kristen mentioned with tier 1, that building-wide review of data all the time. The counselors, really, we just brought these counselors on board 2 years ago, or actually maybe 3 years ago now, excuse me. And then we had the pandemic hit. And we're always evaluating the data that we get, the panorama data, and we're trying to just shore up those services and really tackle the areas that we need to focus on. One of the pay schools you're going to hear about is focusing on that student-teacher relationship piece, making them students feel like they belong, sense of belonging. And that data, not only do we get from Panorama, we're also looking at our 5 essential data as well. And that is reflected in that too. So we're really excited about that. And of course, secondary is, oh, and by the way, I want to go back to elementary real quick. Those counselors that you guys put in place are teaching every elementary classroom weekly with the teacher. So not only is the counselor pushing in, working on some of those curriculums like the second step we use and focusing on data from the panorama and those discipline areas, the teachers are seeing that in action, and they're doing that as a team, which we're building our capacity with our teachers. And then in secondary, we're doing something similar bi-monthly with those SEL lessons. So that's kind of what we're doing across the board. And these are just some of the resources. I won't go through all these, but we are big on the PBIS, which is about the positiveness, because again, I'm going to say this again, when you focus on the positive, kids want our attention, right? And that's something that we see, especially with the younger kiddos, is that's something that works really well. We've got a good track record there. That district discipline committee is essential. They are meeting and always looking at everything. And I want to go back to, or I want to mention that because that committee with the rubrics, those exclusionary, didn't go back to the idea of consistency and aligned, right? So less than probably, I'd say 5-6 years ago, it was a call as a building principal, like, hey, what are you going to do on this offense? Like, this kid did this. How do we handle that? We don't have that anymore. We have the alignment. We have the consistency. So you can get on that exclusionary rubric and really dial it down to what we should do, with always knowing that our admin have the discretionary to always back off to, depending on the situation, because discipline is very individualized, and we have to remember that. So our counselor curriculum, again, is just a couple of the resources we use. The Character Strong is secondary. We use the second step in elementary. And then the behavior plans, that shared folder piece, we really get detail for behavior plans. And that is where we get into some of our tier 2 and tier 3 resources, which, remember, once we implement with students all these tier 1 processes and steps we use, if things aren't working, that's when we bring in the tier 2 and the tier 3. And again, reiterating the counselors, they do small group, not only those classroom lessons, same thing at the secondary, they're getting more involved with tackling those issues. Those individualized behavior plans, I think it's noteworthy to just knowing, coming from a building where I saw students with IEPs that had behavior issues, we really work hard to put plans in place to support our students where they are. with the idea of not advancing them through to an IEP, with the idea of maintaining a working plan that fits the student's needs. In a lot of cases, I would say it was success where we don't have to escalate or take it to the IEP team and assign an IEP. So that's something that we do a really good job at. And of course, we got our student response team. We do have Beth Weiss is our board certified behavior analyst, which is a really big certification that allows her to support those problem-solving teams that are working with our students most in need. And then we just have those partnerships. The one that really stands out is with Robert Young. We have social workers, we pair with Robert Young, they actually come out to the schools and meet with our students. Very strong partnership there that does really well. And that allowed us last year to take advantage of their counseling too.
And then we started Telesite last year,
Yeah, Telesite.
one day.
So that's kind of in a nutshell, our tier 1 and our resources and our tier 2 and 3. Do you guys have any questions?
I do.
Yeah.
First of all, I love PBIS. So, what is that? And you can tell me if it's none of my business, but do you guys, do like game day for, explaining what happens on playground? Because I know playgrounds can be an area where there's a lot of behaviors. Do you guys teach those expectations?
So the traditional practice example with our elementaries is at first, like usually quarterly, but at the beginning of the year, they do the rotations and they teach those expectations. And I think we've got better at within our own capacity of the administrative team to share those out. And now with the counselors using their time during PLC time, we are doing that consistently. Yes.
Something I've seen as a success is for when they do the reteaching for like expectations, is having students who excel getting to be a leader or somebody who's improved getting to help teach the expectations. Do we do anything like that at the elementary level?
I would say yes. I think some of the practices that I can tell you I've seen is where where classrooms, teachers have had students intentionally go up and show the wrong way to do something. And I think, again, that is one of the many pieces that having those elementary counselors in the classroom with the teachers is amplified, because that does happen, because especially with our character strong curriculum, that is something that gets put in there. That's secondary, but it's on
In
the
the high
same
school,
lines.
though, they are also planning, the discipline committee at the high school and under the leadership of Chris Moore are doing some planning this summer for that first day with students to do the high school version of that. Through the creation of videos with student input and having the students help teach those. And then also, they kind of redeveloped their behavior expectations for the whole building and are going to be teaching those period by period the first day back. And so they've also recognized that they need to do more explicit instruction of behavior, even at the high school level. And so but it's not going to look like it does it at the elementary, nor should it. So that'll be a change this year that we'll see in August.
And that alignment piece with elementary, with the dojo and those expectations, the positive or the negative, you could call. We are going to work to have those aligned across 10 elementaries by the end of this year.
Oh, I love
So this is what's going to be different next year in our continuing endeavor to work on our exclusionary discipline data. So as you know, you approved at the last board meeting in June, the mental health training that we're going to be doing with 16 staff. So we'll have at least one counselor per building coming to that mental health training. It's a 3-day training. We're doing that in October here. And this is a train the trainer model. And so with the idea that our counselor teams then can go back to their buildings and continue with their own staff to do the mental health training with their teachers and staff. Another thing that we've done is we have updated our behavior rubrics. And so The behavior rubrics are basically tools that our administrators use when there's behavior enough to kind of warrant processing through what should we do about this? Sometimes it leads to exclusion in real obvious circumstances where maybe there's something brought to school, maybe there's anything, maybe there, all sorts of things. Maybe there's a fight, so they take a look at it and process through it. Sometimes it leads to exclusion, sometimes it doesn't. So we have behaviors that are broken down into categories. We're trying to be real transparent about those things, and those are listed in the codes of conduct. The elementary ones are in, and the secondary ones are in for both the middle school and the high school. The elementary ones are a little softer, I would say, in terms of the language and in terms of options. But we've expanded our restorative options and restorative practice options in there so that it's not always exclusionary. We're trying to keep kids in school. As you know, we have an ATS classroom that you board approved, I think sometime this spring, which will also be an option for keeping kids in school rather than sending them home. We have another dean that we've added to the middle school that can help provide more supervision, more oversight, more options for things like structured day, restricted days versus exclusionary days. And then we are also revising our threat assessment procedures and that document along with, in cooperation with the Moline Police Department, and also updating this and going to be making this more transparent. What's listed in these codes of conduct, and we've got about 28 pages worth, are all reflected in these various board policies, which some of them you have had some 5-year updates in 21 and 22, some not. So many times throughout the codes of conduct, you're going to be reading about reading language and reading policies, and they refer back to our board policies, which are right online for everybody. The last one on there, 830, is our visitors conduct on student property. And so that is listed at the back of your codes after we go through student policies, after we go through our athletic policies. There's a policy for visitors. The principals use this policy a lot, more often than I wish they had to, because sometimes we have adults that come in who are escalated. And so we want to be, many times I recommend that they hand the parent this policy or hand whatever, escalated adult they have this policy, so they understand what our board policies are regarding what our expectations are for their conduct on school property. So rather than having them pull up that policy all the time and remind families of what we expect, we're going to add it to this as well. And so that is at the back, in the back piece of this document. And finally, these are a list of some of the pages that have the most changes or the most additions or most detail that I want you to look at when you're going through these. And so the student appearance section and dress code, those are on pages 1 to 3. The rights and responsibilities as terms of student behavior and what their First Amendment rights are and what they can do if they disagree with something. That's on page 6. And then because we will often give parents that rubric, that working tool, we're just going to put this right in there and list what those offense category are. And it ranges from 1 to 4, 1 being something that's milder, 4 being something that's really more severe, that can sometimes lead to student expulsion. Although the board has not expelled any students in I think 3 to 4 years, which is very good. So that's what's in there for you to look at. The next board meeting will be an opportunity for you to ask further questions as well as approve the codes. Any more questions? Okay.
So in terms of, I know the clothing when I was looking at that it does indicate that the building principal does need determines whether it violates, which we know that even though we might have some rubrics, that there can be some
Sure.
opinions about what's appropriate, not appropriate. And so I guess, are there ability for students to have somebody else help make those decisions based off of people's body types, people's clothing choices, those sorts of things?
Yeah, we've got kind of a graphic in there and we've
Yeah.
got some examples in there. But we don't consider dress code violations exclusionary at all. And you won't even find that on the rubric. The way we prefer to handle dress code violations is just to ask somebody to change their shirt, either turn it inside out if it's some sort of an offensive logo, or just change the shirt, and we'll provide shirts even if they don't have that. And so that's our go-to response for dress code violations. If they're not comfortable with that, they can have somebody bring something from home. However, so we have many options, but exclusionary discipline is not an option for dress code violations.
Question there too. It says clothing that is overly revealing. Who is making that?
That's, yeah, yes.
Aggressive.
And this is one of the areas that we had vetted through Hodges. And so, this is some of their recommended language. So rather than that being up to me or to you, we just have the graphic in there, and that's just the area that we want covered.
That will be consistent across the board.
Yeah, so that picture is in all of the codes, the elementary and the high school.
I think we're gonna put those in the classrooms.
Yeah, we are going to make those visible throughout our schools, so that so it's a nice visual reminder for folks.
Another question, I mentioned, I'd asked before, but for some of the tier 1 stuff that we have, that is the SEL stuff that's happening at the secondary level. Just, I know there have been ongoing conversations about how, because you don't have the counselors in there all the time helping with those things and the training, and whether or not. So I guess, how is that continuing to move forward? I guess, what is the plan for this fall to continue helping those teachers feel better prepared to make those valuable time?
It's a great question. Actually, the teachers this year have wanted to take more ownership of those lessons, particularly at the high school level. And so they have kind of, I would say, really shown the desire to put more work into developing those lessons rather than having a counselor provide them to them. They developed a team at the high school, and they're going to be doing some work in August to develop different SEL lessons that address things like climate and culture, school spirit. They want to get kids more involved. They want some of their SEL lessons to be more action oriented and activity oriented. And so they're going to be they'll look at their panorama data for sure. They'll look at some of our research-based materials that we have, but then they also are going to be working on some more, developing some activities that they can do with those every other Wednesdays, and in an effort to work on that relationship piece. And we know that the better relationships are with kids, the less behavior you're going to have. So it's kind of a three-pronged approach, but they want to be more involved in the development of those things. They've kind of taken on some ownership of that, and that's exactly where we want it to be. And that's the first time really I've ever really heard a desire for them to own that piece. So I'm kind of excited about it.
I do think that's great. I know, like last year, like my students, their time was during Spanish class, and they did the lessons that they did them in like Spanish. So it's a nice combination of like, level things. But I guess middle school level, do we think that's going to be encouraged for maybe hopefully the motivation to take on some of that ownership of those to make those more valuable times? So
It's been a little different at the middle schools. And so the counselors at the middle schools have definitely developed those lessons and review them in a little bit different way with the teachers to deliver those things. I think sometimes they do them on Fridays. And so they're sticking pretty heavily with the character strong, but we also encouraged them to take a page maybe out of the high school book and do more activity-based lessons versus everything. Not that we want to throw character strong away, not at all, but add in that mix as well. Because I think the more we can get teachers excited about what that is, the more the kids know it, you know, the kids know when the teachers are excited about the lesson and really want to deliver the content, and when they're just getting through it. And so we really want them to own it and enjoy what they're doing, so.
I just want to say, Kristen, thank you. I applaud the high school teachers, you know, coming up front and doing that, because being a high school teacher myself, it really counselors do as much as they can with that many students in the high school. Can't ever get to all of them. It's the teacher who really, you know, we build that relationship with the student. So thank you to all high school teachers for doing that. You know.
I'm so proud of them
Me
for
too.
really caring that much and really wanting to own it.
People noticing what needs to be done more with intentionality that
Absolutely.
individual needs. I have one other thing, and so the mental health first aid training and stuff, so I know we're doing the train the trainer model with that. So like I've gone through that like many years ago and had to do an online version that was not pleasant. And then have done the in-person one. So is the plan that once they're trained, that that'll be in-person training done with the rest of the staff?
So
It's
once-
not a
yes.
module thing, okay.
It's in person.
Okay, good.
The package that we were able to get from the company, because they're so busy, October was their first available.
Yeah.
Allows for 16 individuals. So it worked out that that's pretty much how many counselors we have. And so they will receive the 3-day face-to-face training. And then that keeps those individuals nationally certified for 3 years.
Yeah.
That they will have to go to their buildings on Wednesdays and begin to impart some of that knowledge. And it's youth mental health first aid, as you know, you probably have had it. I know a number of districts in Iowa have had it. And the incentive behind the information is pure knowledge. It's not to ask the teacher to do anything more that they're not equipped or trained for. They're not asked to diagnose. They're not asked to treat. They're really just asked to learn how to better identify when a kid is struggling. And we've seen that a lot. And we know that we've had a lot of kids struggle that we haven't seen. You know, they've been able to keep under the radar. So it helps the teacher better identify the signs. And then secondly, serve simply as a conduit to make sure the child gets handed off to the right person, be it the trained counselor, the medical professional, emergency services, whatever it is. So that's something that we want to make clear, but it's important. And I'm really glad that we were able to get this national program here, knowing then they will be able to go back to their buildings over the next however many Wednesdays it takes, but to take the next 3 years to make sure that everybody has that information. So it's gonna take a little while, but that was the model that we were able to get to as soon as possible.
Awesome, thank you.
I have one and I promise I'm done. So as a teacher myself, of course, we have school expectations, but every teacher has their own style. But are we letting them know that their own style has to be through this lens of code of conduct, so we're being 100% consistent?
So one of the things in terms of secondary, that they're planning on doing is, they kind of drill down these 4 R's: respectful, responsible. Matt, do you remember the other 2 R's?
They circled through a few of them, so we got.
Yeah. I don't know how many would start with R. So anyway, this was some of the work that the discipline committee did. It was in May. I would have them at the right tip of my tongue. So they're going to go through those 4 R's in terms of how that looks in their classroom. But those 4 expectations are consistent through in every classroom. But it can look a little different if you're teaching, you know, Spanish or an EL class versus, you know, physics. And so, or welding. And so that is one thing they plan on doing. In terms of what's in the codes, one of the reasons why we wanted some of the graphics was so that those things could be readily available and they would maybe feel a little bit more comfortable if they had to remind a student that there was a dress code violation, that they could do it in a private manner, that they could consistently do it and just can't, you know, show them graphics. So we're trying to have them be more consistent with that, and so we're trying to make it easy as possible for them to be consistent. And this was one tool we thought would help with that, because I feel for them with that. I know it's such a careful conversation, and so we are trying to make it as easy and as neutral as possible, and so that's the reason for that.
So as you said that, it made me think of, are you also having the support personnel included in this? Because I know, you know, they're working a small group in a for a computer lab situation. Do they also have that so that they understand that, you know, they're the way that they not discipline, but expect their classroom to run is the same way?
Yeah, so this is some of that first day back. And so we all come together in the BPAC in the morning, and then the building principals work with their staff in the afternoons back in their buildings. And so our MESPA stay for the afternoon for that building wide PD. And so we can make sure, and one of the reasons why we kind of changed a little bit the model of how we're including support staff in our professional development, that we want to include them in what everybody's working on versus trying to come up with something separate for them. And so this day back, the January 3rd day back, we started to include them in on those things, so they can get the same information as everybody else. And so the reason why we want to get this accomplished before the first day of school is so that we can deliver it to the principals and that they can have that covered for when everybody comes back.
And once they are board approved, we will send them out to all families district-wide by email.
So they'll be able, and have some hard copies available as well.
I don't have any more questions, but I do want to say to my fellow board members, we need to read this. We need to know this. And we need to know our policies, because when we do have community members come and talk to us or have concerns, we have to know what this says. And when we approve something, we should really know what we're approving backwards and forwards. So.
And I anticipate that you may get questions from the community. You may have a parent question it or ask. And so the better informed you are about it, I think it will help you if you get approached about what it is, why it is, you know, as well. I know we do at our end at Allendale as well, you know, when there's questions about various policies, we very often hear, you know, about it. And so I think it's important that everybody's on the same page, you know, Allendale, teachers, administrators, the board, and so that we all know what's.
And this is a really good time to mention our norms and our roles. When we do get these questions, it is not our job to give opinions. It is our job to find the answers or send them to the appropriate person for the answers. That way we are keeping it consistent with the system and making sure parents and community members get correct information.
So I will just give one last reminder about these two pieces that are in there, the rights and responsibilities of the students, that we did have Hodges look that over pretty carefully, and they made recommended changes, and we adopted every recommended change. So, and didn't go rogue on those two sections.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. This is on the agenda for approval of the district students code of conduct. Recommend motion for just code of conduct as presented.
I'd like to recommend that we table this for our meeting. Over.
Is that a roll call?
It's all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right, number 10 is the approval of the resolution for the purchase of property and gain.
Yes, if you look at that, is a picture of Lincoln Irving at the bottom of the screen. And the green properties are what we already own as of last Thursday. I closed on this house right here. And then I told you last board meeting, we had another person that was interested, and that's the red property. So with that, I'm gonna ask you to do the same thing you've had in the past. Give the authority to the superintendent and myself to move forward with closing on that house at 90% of the independent appraised value. And then really that sets it up for the future when the district, if ever deems this to be a project where they want to add on and do something like a larger element. So that gives you a visual. That's all I got.
All right, any questions for Dave? All right. Okay, so the recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the purchase of the property located at 1411 11th Street, Moline, Illinois, for the purchase price of $148,410 plus closing costs, with the intent to demolish the property, and further authorizes and directs Dave McDermott, Chief Financial Officer, to execute all documents and do all of things necessary to effect the purchase of the property upon the terms that he and the superintendent deem acceptable. Motion.
So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Audrey Adamson.
Aye.
Kate Schaefer.
Aye.
Maria Estergero.
Aye.
Andrew Ware.
Aye.
Karen Wondren Smith.
Aye. All right, number 11 is reports, requests, and open discussion. Dr. Savage.
Okay, a couple of things before we get to the items listed there. Registration for new students is at Wilson next week, August 2nd and 3rd. And as a reminder, this is for new students to the district, new kindergarten students, or any current families that need to do address verification. We've had a number of parent messages and reminders going out, and so we look forward to that process. It's a great first step in welcoming our many new families to our district. All other returning students to the district are asked to complete the registration process online. We have had, number 2, we have had a significant level of facility projects throughout the district this summer. I'd like to acknowledge Mr. McDermott and Mr. Karstens and the entire maintenance and facilities department for all of their hard work this summer. I know Mr. McDermott will provide an update on our HVAC projects here shortly, but with so much happening around the district, they've managed to coordinate and execute well, given all of the other regular responsibilities and all of the challenges associated with doing big projects at this time, such as labor and materials. So I just wanted to acknowledge them. Summer school has gone well. I provided an earlier update to you via email with numbers, but I could report that the academic recovery process is successfully continuing in terms of credit recovery at Moline High School. And we continued with skill building at the elementary levels in June and most of July. We have jumpstart programs happening at some of our elementaries in August, as well as our extended school year will be starting very soon. We were recently highlighted in a magazine called The Municipal. I sent you the link in the event you hadn't seen it, which is a magazine that focuses on municipalities across America. I sent you the link, but it was a great piece highlighting the partnership with the City of Moline for the Public Works Internship Program. And it's just great to see the work of the Board of Education, from brainstorming to development to goal approval to implementation. So it's great to see that work come to fruition for the betterment of our students and our community. And it's great to have others recognize and honor that work. And lastly here, I may be reaching out to you via email to schedule an additional Board of Education meeting in August. As you know, we have only one traditional meeting scheduled, and that is on Monday, August 21st, which would be the first week of school, as school starts that Friday, the 26th. We do have one final administrator hire that we should be ready to process before that. And for that building's team's sake to be able to be working together, we'd like to get that individual approved before the week of the 22nd. So I might be reaching out to you via email to check your availability the week of Monday, the 8th, to see if we would have enough folks available for a quorum to approve that admin hire if that process is successful. And we can certainly add a few other items, such as potentially the codes of conduct and a few other small items if board members are available to conduct that business. So any comments or suggestions on dates? or shall I send a?
Yeah. Lock Mondays out, so.
On our August
I'll be working.
21st meeting, I will be bringing cake.
Nice. Very good. Well, thank you for that. I will reach out to you via email to get a final confirmation on that. And we certainly appreciate the ability to get that important business conducted and ready so our principals can hit the ground running with their team. So thank you for that. Couple of other items you have before you, a copy of our draft pay schools for this year. Remember, this is our working document for our strategic planning. We do utilize, again, as mentioned before, the acronym PACE for people, achievement, community, and environment. And the goal in our process is to keep this very manageable for teachers and staff and principals, but also manageable for parents and community and folks that might not be directly involved in our work. So these goals are our new big rocks for each year. You will see some of these pieces carried over from the last couple of years. Of course, the pandemic has shackled us somewhat to continue to drive all of our changes as we spent so much time managing the pandemic. But this is a process that is quite user-friendly and that we're proud of. The results of these goals come from unfinished work from last year. They come from a lot of stakeholder input. We surveyed our parents, we worked with our principals, we worked with our teachers to get input in various different ways throughout the school year on things that we need to focus on. And then the other piece that I was going to say, it also comes from data. So the discipline data, as an example that you saw tonight, our panorama data, which is our social emotional, our mental health screener, a lot of those data pieces inform our goals. And then lastly, I would just say before reviewing them, once the goal comes off of this chart, it doesn't mean it goes away or it's no longer important. The way I see it, it has become a part of our standard operating procedure, just the way we do things, the part of our fabric. So we feel confident when a goal comes off, then that means it is a process that is secure and will continue on. So we tried to keep it simple with 2 goals for each category, but we did have 3 for achievement. I won't read them word for word. Our 2 people goals focus on continuing to aggressively recruit and retain our diverse staff. We've got a number of different irons in the fire to continue that process. We know that the demographics of our students are changing, and we want to get better at ensuring that our staff that works with our students represents their demographics as well. So that is an ongoing goal, probably will be ongoing for quite some time. And our second goal, of course, is a heavy mental health focus this year. This is the certification for youth mental health first aid, and then all of the trickle-down training that will reach all certified staff and our support staff. Like Kate was mentioning before, the importance of keeping our support staff in line with these trainings as well. For achievement, we have 3 goals. 2 of the goals are coming off of the new Illinois Department of Education Equity Journey Continuum. It's the new metric by which the district will be rated, and it takes a look at 4 student populations. Our students that qualify for free or reduced lunch, our students that qualify for special needs or an IEP, our English learners, and then it also takes a look at student populations by race and ethnicity. And then it looks at our academic achievement and identifies the assessments or the academic areas where we have greater gaps in achievement. And for us, we really were able to focus in on 2 areas that we would like to improve upon in the future, where we see larger gaps among those student groups. In some of the other areas, the gap is smaller, meaning our students are performing more uniformly across the district. So the 2 areas of focus, again, this is a brand new metric. I think at the State Department of Ed, bless you, they're still trying to figure it out. Certainly superintendents and principals are still trying to figure out. But as we dive into this data, for sure there's 2 areas of academic growth out of the gates that we can focus on. One is the kindergarten readiness assessment called KIDS that all of our kindergarten teachers implement with their students. We've got some pretty aggressive training happening, and we've certainly purchased curriculum and purposeful play materials so that those teachers can be better informed in how they diagnose and rate a kindergarten student's, I guess, current readiness to learn. And the second area that the State Board of Education asks us to look at as a quality indicator is the rate of our 8th grade students taking algebra and the rate of our 8th grade students passing algebra. So we are going to dig into this a lot this year. We are on the foreground of a K through 8 total district curriculum math adoption. And so that is happening nicely and organically at the same time, as long as some pretty significant math instruction PD, pedagogy instructional technique. So we're going to be looking at all of those pieces, in particular, how our middle school students receive instruction regarding algebra. The next one, we are continuing with our MAP growth assessment. This has been the sort of quality indicator for academic growth. And I can tell you, all signs are showing to some pretty serious academic growth over this past year, despite the challenges of being thrust back into a full school day and, you know, folks not being ready and kids not being ready. We saw some serious jumps in growth, K through 8 in math. It's very exciting. So we've got some targeted PD to help our principals and teachers do better goal setting with kids. And that's a process that we're going to implement with Fidelity and want to tighten it up with a goal. And then the other secondary piece, as we continue with our career pathway development, our students take the Zello assessment, and we've been able to identify a number of career pathways through that Zello data, such as the cybersecurity and networking program that's going to be launching, and our Grow Your Own Teacher program, and quite a few other of our career pathways. So now, Dr. DeBain and our intermediary that we have hired to help with our career-based readiness experiences, they're going to dig deeper into that Zello data and find what are the next 4 career areas that our students are ranking the highest, and try to figure out what's the next step in putting together experiences to help those students receive exposure in those areas. So using the data to help define our next pathways at the high school level. For community, we've mentioned 5 essentials a little bit. We're going to be digging into that. This is a survey that is administered to all districts in the state of Illinois. Our parents look at it, our teachers look at it, and kids. And this is an opportunity for us to better identify our areas of growth and improvement. And we know that parents are craving engagement after being really locked out because of the pandemic over the last couple of years. And we see that in that response data. We want to engage more parents so that our school program meets the needs of our community and what our parents want of us as we educate their kids. So digging into that data, getting some trained professionals that are very deeply informed with the survey to help us better understand our data. Communication, when we did the Board of Education state brainstorming for our goals, I heard a lot about streamlining communication. Some schools do it some way, another school does it another way, some schools do more, some schools do it less. So our principals are going to work together in August to define their own non-negotiables. So having our 10 elementary principals decide, what are we all going to agree to do in terms of communicating with parents, with what tools and with what frequency? And then we're going to do that same process for secondary as well. We know that secondary communication looks different for parents. You know, we get a lot of warm, fuzzy stuff in elementary, and then it kind of trickles off as kids get older. We try to encourage kids to be more in control of their learning, and maybe that means parents take a back seat, but parents still want to know what's going on. They want to be involved and they want to be engaged in the process. So we have not streamlined that before in terms of baseline expectations by level. And certainly they can do more, but we want to establish that baseline. And then lastly, for environment, our panorama data, we are focusing on 2 things: student sense of belonging and strengthening the teacher-student relationship. That those 2 pieces, we saw the most significant dip in our last administration of the panorama survey. And we've been analyzing that and reflecting on that pretty significantly this summer. I know the high school set some of its own improvement goals on this very same area. We see connection with the social emotional lessons that we're going to do. So we're using the data to drive improvement. And then lastly, Erin, to answer your question about how do we make sure this happens with fidelity in terms of implementing these codes of conduct? Well, making it a pay scale ensures that that happens. It's no longer an option, but we will make sure that folks have an opportunity to read it, understand it, receive some professional development, so we know how to tackle it, but that was by design. So any feedback on the goals? Not asking you to vote on them necessarily, but always looking for feedback on anything that needs to be tightened up before we, you know, print them off and send them out and put them on our website. I'm always looking for feedback.
This isn't necessarily something that changes, but I was thinking about the career pathway, and I hear a lot still in the community, well, we need to focus on the trades, we need to do things like that, but we really can't. Is there a way we could do something like that? Did you know? I mean, I know we can only, you know, wave our hands so much, but if we could really highlight these things. Yes.
Kind of like what St. Ethan was
Right.
doing with the little videos that were
Yes.
available, that, oh, you know, this is how we define a snow day, so to speak. But usually we do something with the.
You know,
Yes. I love
just
it.
to kind of keep the community in the loop, just so we can constantly, like, we are doing this, this is what's happening next.
All those moment moments. or
Moment
something like that.
moments,
Yeah.
yeah. That's amazing.
Thank you, that's good feedback. Any others? Very good. Moving on. Sorry, this is an information heavy night. Trying to get through it quickly. Last piece, and then I will stop talking. I wanted to just provide a brief update on school safety. I know that we have been thinking about this a lot. We've been talking about this a lot, and school safety is never done. And we don't have a plan that we stick on a shelf and then that's our plan forever. We have a very active district safety committee. We have many folks with boots on the ground that are constantly striving to provide improvements in safety and security across all departments, our administrators, the district, ed tech. Mr. Reed has been quite instrumental in helping with that. And one of our greatest partners is the Moline Police Department. I cannot tout enough the benefits of the solid, positive working relationship that we have with them. And I believe that puts our district miles ahead of districts and cities that don't have a positive working relationship. And I believe it makes us more safe as a community because we have open communication and we work together all the time. So this is just a quick little update on where we are at with things. Of course, we don't really communicate our full plans to the public, but I want the Board of Education and our community to know that we are working on this all the time. Working groups, we've got a collaborative leadership group that is meeting with the Moline Police Department. We had one meeting in July and we will be meeting quarterly throughout the year. We have a district safety team, we have a district threat assessment team, and we have some pretty amazing school liaison officers that serve as our partners in keeping kids and staff safe. We've had a lot of professional learning and more to come. In 2020, we hosted the National Threat Assessment Center training called Protecting America's Schools, again, in collaboration with the Moline Police Department. On August 19th, our administrators are going to receive incident command training via the Moline Police Department, along with an overview of school resource liaison best practices. We are always recalibrating that. As we learn more, you know, when we know more, we do better. So we're always calibrating with our admin, the functionality of that resource and how they work hand in hand with our school-based teams. Mr. Moore is implementing grade level meetings at Moline High School to review safety measures and protocols with kids and encouraging them and empowering them and teaching them the tools of how to speak up if they need to speak up. Along with ed tech and training, we've had a lot of facility measures, ensuring our buildings are locked down, ensuring our buildings have crisis plans. We have visitor management systems. Our entrances are now properly coded and identified so that the PD can get to the right door at the right time because they know what door it is because they're all properly coded and identified now. We've been able to work on putting together emergency go kits. In a recent grant award, well, it was February, I guess, not very recent anymore, co-written, Dr. Demain with the Moline Police Department, 2 big wins, and also Mr. Reed and Ed Tech. Omni Alert emergency messaging system is going to be rolled out, as well as the Vigilon camera system grant that is now putting cameras at intersections near all of our schools. And we're still, those cameras are being installed and the tech is still being set up. So we're in the very infant stages of putting all of that together. And really just in talking with Mr. Reed, understanding all of the different functions that Omni Alert emergency messaging will have once we understand it and receive the training. So those are positive collaborations that make us more safe as a community. A couple of other things planned for this year. The Moline Police Department, they have new officers that come and they have some that leave. So they want to make sure that they are getting into every single one of our schools again this year. It's been intermittent periodically and certainly not much at all during the pandemic, but they will conduct new walkthroughs in all of our facilities this year, as well as coordinate an updated school safety assessment. So they can help us identify areas of improvement in each of our facilities and make sure that their new officers have a chance to get into all of our buildings. Sometimes they'll pick one building and they'll conduct training. I know they've conducted training at Wharton, but now they want to have a plan to get back into all of our schools to refresh their officers on our layouts. And of course, drills and rescue task force coordination. So these are our community emergency management, the police department, fire, and EMS. They're working together for us in our schools. Mental health resources, you've heard a lot of that tonight. It goes hand in hand with how students accord themselves. We have hired 7 counselors in the last handful of years, and that 5 that we hired in 2019 was just priceless timing. I mean, we did not know that the pandemic was going to hit that following spring, and I'm so grateful that we were able to get that done. I don't know that we would have been able to hire them after that. And we would have been another 2 years. So I am so grateful for that Board of Education decision to invest in that level of personnel. And they have been just crucial as we navigated the pandemic. Handle with Care program, another great collaboration with the Moline Police Department. Does not cost $1 for the police department to send a message to administrators and counselors. And all it says is, Rachel needs to be handled with care. Every day. But they just have a student's name. It says that student needs to be handled with care. We receive no other information other than if we're getting that email, then that child has witnessed some sort of trauma in the last 24 hours.
That is so important.
So whether the police were at the home, whether the child observed a crime, whether the child observed some tragedy, we have a better shot at helping that kid in the right way, other than just maybe misdiagnosing as maybe the child is being naughty in the moment or whatever the case may be. That has been an amazing program. Our youth mental health first aid or other partners in the community. Suicide hotline and crisis prevention numbers are now required by law to be on the back of every student's school ID in grades 6 through 12, mostly because our elementary kids don't carry IDs. We have anonymous tip reporting. We have a therapy dog program. One of the reasons in relocating our Coolidge Alternative program was also to get them closer to the supports for social and emotional needs, counseling and advising. So that was another big piece. We've got some student groups at Moline High School. We have social emotional learning time embedded into our day now. And I am most proud of School Health Link, our school-based clinic that will now be on site at Moline High School and provide additional nursing support to all of our students. Now they can see any kid in the county. They have currently a brick and mortar location in Rock Island, but we were kind of first to say, oh, pick us when they were looking for a school to settle in, because now we've got that resource in a place where families can access them more easily. And most of the students that they see are Moline students anyway, but they can do immunizations. They can do physicals. Hopefully, we're having to, exit far fewer kids each year because they don't have the law mandated physical and things like that. So I'm most grateful. And again, they will work in concert with our current nursing staff. That is not going away. That is staying there. That open house will be coming up towards the end of August, so we're very excited about that. It was woven into the A-wing renovation. We've got our drills there, our reporting mechanisms, and some of our planned communication. So I don't want to be throwing so much at you, but it's important. We haven't talked about it in a while, and I want the board to know and the community to know that we are always working on this behind the scenes. And I just thought providing a little update would be useful at this time. Any questions that you have for me?
I have a quick one. With the hard lockdowns and soft lockdowns, do we do any SEL with that? Because that's a fairly intense experience, especially for our little ones. Is that woven into their counseling lessons, talking about how to deal with fear and things like that?
Kristen, do you have specifics on that? I know they find the balance between letting people know that they're going to have a drill and not. I know typically they might communicate with the teachers that have students of our special needs populations. But as far as additional communication, I believe parents were notified for the off-campus.
For the evacuation.
Evacuation,
Evacuation drills.
I know that, but are they like, that can be for students with their counselors? Is there a time for
I
them
don't
to?
know that it's the counselors per se versus the classroom teachers. Providing additional information,
Make sure that's
stats and
happening.
language regarding the reason why they're doing it.
Yes.
And when we've done the
That's good.
reunification drills, it hasn't necessarily been tied to because there's an active shooter and we need to learn how to reunify on off-site place. It can be for a variety of reasons. It can be a smoke, it can be fire, it can be water, it can be a multitude of reasons why we would maybe need to relocate to another off-site location. And I can tell you that each cabinet member and extended cabinet member partners with all of the schools on those drills. So for example, I go with Hamilton on their drill, I go with Franklin on their drill. And so, and I know Rachel's been on some of those drills as well. And I can tell you, the kids are usually really excited about the drills in a way that they think it's a huge adventure.
I get that, but I just think that is there a time where they're allowed to ask questions?
Yes,
And they're
absolutely.
allowed to,
But that happens in the classroom, not necessarily in a non-contextualized.
I just want to make sure they have that opportunity.
And we'll make sure that
But
is.
I also think though, that you do need to know that there are some classrooms and some groups of kids who struggle more with some of the lockdown concepts than other kids. And so, and some of our life skills classrooms, it looks very different. It
Absolutely.
looks very different.
I guess I just want to know that there's a time I'm 7 years old and I want to ask a question that's in there.
And I think those are, parents were provided advanced warning, and I think we have had some parents opt out of those drills or opt their children out of those drills because of that, but I don't know that we do any hard lockdown drills. I know we do a lot of soft lockdown drills and evacuation drills, but some of the hard lockdown drills aren't super hard. You know, it's the lights are off and the doors are locked, and then they'll go around and they'll check to see if they're.
I know as a
Will
teacher,
ensure.
yeah, as like a
Yeah.
teacher myself, they'll be like, well, why are we doing this? They'll just ask questions. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure during that time
Yes.
they're able to get.
A great question.
Yes.
And a good reminder.
One more thing, so these are all fabulous, and I know I've chatted with you about it, and I know last year we did the, potentially try to have that security night that we didn't have great turnout at, that we had the Be Smart stuff, but there's been a big push in terms of resolutions by school boards to promote gun storage safety, and that would be part of registration materials, and it's happened across many states and districts, and so I'd like to maybe just introduce the idea that we maybe propose something moving forward that goes home with students, just the parents that just encourages safe gun storage and the importance of that, since about 75% of shooters or active things that come to schools secure their items from their home and secure them. slid in process of unsecured funds. And so I think putting that information out to our district is somewhat our responsibility to keep our students and our community safe. So, but I have some draft stuff that I can send from some of the organizations that I belong to, but I think in line with all of these things we're doing, that we can do some things that also provide our community important information. It's good. So thank you for putting this all together and in place.
Very good. So moving on to our HVAC construction update. Mr. McDermott is going to give us a breakdown of all of that.
Okay, bearer of bad news. Recall, we were very proactive, one of the most proactive school districts to identify the CARES funds for air quality improvement. So we got 3 schools right now in the summer being put air conditioning and new ceilings and LED lighting and everything. And it's been a struggle. You know, construction's a struggle right now in the world. But if you recall back in October, we pre-ordered our chillers because it was going to take 28 to 30 weeks. Well, we've been told last week that they're not going to get in until after school starts. So that's bad news. The good news is we believe we'll be able to have all the buildings put back together, and everything that needs to be done will be on the exterior of the buildings. Maybe some interior work, but nothing major to disrupt a teacher's classroom. So that's the good news. The bad news is, you know, who knows when they're going to come in. And remember, the chillers are the things that look like half the size of a semi pickup. So it'll take probably 10 to 12 working days to get that ready afterward. So best case scenario, they come in end of August. Maybe we get a few working days and heat days before that. So we will probably, I'll communicate that to, I wanted to do it to the board. Now I'll do it to the principal so they can disseminate that to you know, the staff. It's disappointing, but not totally unexpected. The bad news is if you go by Butterworth, and you go by Jane Addams, those buildings are pretty tore up. But Butterworth's easier because that chiller is going to be outside, kind of near the John Deere Road, and then they put that wall down there. Easy access to get it in and do the work. Will not disrupt many of the kids' activities out in the playground or anything like that. Logan, it's on the roof. Again, when you got to put the crane in, there's concrete there, there's, you know, driveway, not a big deal. But if you go to Jane Addams, that temporary road is going to have to still remain because a crane's got to get the chiller on top of the new boiler. So challenges. Wilson's going good. So that's about all I got.
I just wondered if you wanted to mention that because of that, we are already getting a jump on next summer's.
Well, we already planned for the next 3 buildings. Originally, we're gonna get 6 buildings done. The 3 we got now, and then it's Jefferson, Washington, and Lincoln Irving next summer. So we originally tried to be out there in September, October. We're trying to get done with 2 schools at least. We're struggling with Jefferson's design because there's no room in the ceiling. So we're gonna try to get the other ones done a little earlier, a month maybe ahead of time. But I have less hope for next year being successful than this year, just because everybody will be trying to do the same thing. Hey, I'm truthful.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
good news is it's progressing. Bad news, not first day of school, but hopefully thereafter.
Thank you. And then the last thing, we will be very excited to show the Board of Education our final renovation of A-Wing at Moline High School. This is where the Coolidge program is moving to and being rebranded as the Aspire program. This is our alternative secondary education program. It's very exciting. I probably will send out a doodle poll with some dates so that we can get a few of you in at a time to walk through the space. We're very excited to show you that progress.
Okay, I have a couple things. I do want to say about the Aspire. I just want to take a second to recognize Andy, who has championed this since the start. And I appreciate his leadership and the support and just really being out there for this. I met with Dr. Savage recently, and we had a one-on-one. A couple things I wanted to bring up is we are in an election year. We will have board members running or community running, and so we thought it might be a good idea to educate the public on what it means to be a board member. What does it look like? What are our responsibilities? Maybe a chance for people to ask questions, so people really know what they're getting into, what our role is, what our role isn't. I've just seen a lot of this idea that, this is what I'm going to do. And then you get here and there's a whole lot more to what people see on being the board. And since we're a school district, it is our job to help educate. And so I feel very passionate about this. And I hope you guys will jump on board and be a part of this process. And in that same avenue, we all might need a refresher too about what our roles are, so we can be good examples. And so I talked to her about having somebody come in and just kind of refresh what our roles are. What is the open meeting act? What do these things mean? So we can be on the top of our game as well. So, also, super eval. I sat in with Todd and Rachel on a super eval system instead of us making it up ourselves. It's going to be on our next agenda. It is a great program. It is user-friendly. It is user-friendly to Dr. Savage and superintendents. She's able to spend all year putting in what she's working on. We can see that it's very user-friendly, and what it really does is, like, when we're off and the next board comes on, they have a tool. There's a consistent tool for evaluation. And I don't know if you guys know this, but in the state of Illinois, it is required in the law for our superintendent to be evaluated. So I think we need an excellent tool. And that will be on our next agenda for approval, okay?
And I did put out the link of the archived webinar from School Board Association. I know Rock Island, I've talked to Dr. Lawrence about that tool. I know that Rock Island has implemented it as well. So.
Other discussion?
I think that is a wonderful.
Yes, yes,
I
agree. And it really was, I think it'll be user friendly, it won't be complicated, and it does come with training. All right. So now we are going to go to number 12, which is closed session. Consider the collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or the representatives for deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes and studies. This is it. I have a motion. I have a motion to move in the closed session. Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Redo that for you.
I was already.
I have a motion to return to open session.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There we go.
All right. The Board of Education to approve a 4-year agreement between the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Local 672, and the Moline Coal Valley Board of Education for the 2020-23, 2023-2024, 2024-2025, and 2025-26 school years. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Kate Schaefer.
Aye.
Maria Estrelleros. Aye. Andrew Wayers.
Aye.
Audrey Adamson. Aye. Erin Muldren Smith.
Aye. All right, the approval of the non-union educational support personnel employee compensation. That the Board of Education approves the compensation and increases to all non-union educational support personnel employees, which provides compensation similar to other bargaining groups, including year of service steps plus COLA, including group insurance benefits for the 2022-2023 school year. Could I have a motion, please? Yeah, I'm okay.
So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Maria Estragaros.
Aye.
Andrew Ware,
Aye.
Audrey Adamson.
Aye.
Kate Schaefer,
Aye.
Aaron Waldron Smith.
Aye. All right. May I have a motion to adjourn? Second. Anyone opposed? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.